Hi, this is Bob Palmerton, and today I'm going to show you how I use reference photos in painting my landscape pastels. We're going to modify those photos. We're going to play around with contrast to bring out overexposed distances, and often when you take a photo, you can't see the clouds because the sky's washed out. I could show you how to fix that. Adding saturation to help colors pop in your pastel painting. Rearranging elements, which is really key, from several different photos for a more pleasing composition, creating a grayscale version of the painting and the photo to capture those values accurately. And my favorite is turning an overcast day into a sunny day. So I don't do so much plein air painting. I take a lot of photos and I use them to the best of my abilities to create my landscapes. Here is an example of a washed out distance. Photograph is Glacier National Park, St. Mary Falls. The distant mountain is very washed out because the exposure really focused on the foreground, which was a deep shade with dark foliage. So what I'll do is I'm in Windows 11. You can, I believe, also do this with Windows 10. I'm going to my photo editor and I'm going to go play around with that contrast button. Notice the mountain is darkening a bit by lowering the contrast. The foreground's getting very washed out, as we know, as you could see. But the distance is a little more strong, a little more emphatic because the edges of that mountain are coming out a little better than certainly than in the photograph. And this tool also helps, by the way, to when you reduce the contrast in a sky, if you want to pick up clouds that you know were there but they didn't show up in the photo. So if I zoom in just a bit here, you can see a little more of the ridges in the mountain. Again, that dark edge on the left, and a little more gradation of the color. You know, the color's a little stronger, and you could wash it all out and make it disappear. But I find this tool in modifying a contrast to be very effective with distance. And the other approach you could take is when you take photos, you could take a clear photo of the distance, a clear photo of the foreground, so both will be properly exposed. So they're tricks of the trade in terms of taking photos, but if you didn't get to do that, if you're hiking, and I do a lot of hiking, you might as well take your photo and put it on a editing tool like this and play around in it. Here I'm using the exposure button to modify a photo, and here the effect is not as emphatic. The foreground is kind of very dark and shady. The whole picture is actually darkening, so that's why I don't think exposure works very well here as a tool. I would really focus there on the contrast. And frankly, even if I use the brightness button is going to wash out the distance further, and it's going to make the whole photo brighter. So it's not going to really help you out very much with this using this tool. Similar situation here with this mountain ridge, which I also eventually used in the final painting. This mountain ridge also gets a little more defined if you reduce that contrast. See more of the edges of the tree lines and the rocky edges, and even some of the color shows up a little bit better by reducing the contrast in that part of the distant mountain. So the painting is on the right, the 18 by 24 pastel painting is on the right. There's the reference photo. So notice a couple things. I've moved items around. The trees in the photo are on the right, but here in the painting they're on the left. And I did it that way so that I could kind of invite the viewer to looking at that distance in those mountains. Even these three pines here on the right kind of point you into this, call it like a circular composition, if you will, of this particular landscape. Now notice the falls. The falls are going in a different direction in the painting, and I spread them out further and also added a larger upper falls section, and I think that really kind of enhanced the composition. In addition to adding this path on the right that's not there in the photo. It's a very rocky waterfall. You could kind of walk around and jump across the rocks, etc., but there was no real clear path to get to it. And anyway, my path's blocked off by the waterfall, so you're not going to get through there. And again, there's that mountain view from a different reference photo that I moved into my final painting and even made a few modifications to that also. All right, so we all know that values are really important. Getting the values right is really key in a painting. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to the grayscale option. So I'll go to my photo editing tool and I'm going to go to filters. Filters is right there. And I'm going to scroll down to black and white. Very simple. So there's your grayscale version of the main reference photo that I used for my St. Mary's Fields painting. I'm going to do the same thing with the digital image of my painting. And by the way, I often, every morning when I paint, I'll take a digital image of the painting and I'll put it up on my screen and take a look and see what I want to change, what I want to modify. In this particular case, I think the values are pretty close. Again, the distance is from a different right, different reference photo, right? But I do feel that the values are pretty much representative of the photograph. So there you go. So there's the black and white version. It doesn't have a grayscale version on the photo editing tool with Windows 10 or 11 like your phone might, but this is pretty much a grayscale version. And later on, I'm going to show you how we get an intense black and white version of the photo to help us create our notan for a particular landscape painting. So here's the composition, the comparison of the grayscales. I'm pretty happy with this. So I think we're pretty much done with this painting, and I think we're going to go to Mount Rainier National Park. Reference on the left, photo painting on the right. This is the Tolme Peak hike. Wonderful hike in Mount Rainier. Notice Mount Rainier is very hazy way back there. So once again, I'm going to use that contrast tool to bring in more ridges. Notice the painting has a little more emphatic, darker ridges, darker blue ridges there than the reference photo. So let's enlarge the reference photo. Again, go to our Edit button on the upper left of the photo editing tool. We're going to go run into Adjustments, so not Filters, but Adjustments, and play around with our contrast. So carefully look at how Mount Rainier's dark ridges get a little bit darker and you get more detail in that snow. The snow was very washed out, so now we see a little more contrast with the very rocky surface of Mount Rainier. Personal note, my daughter summited Mount Rainier a couple of years ago, so I'm very interested in Mount Rainier National Park, and there's just wonderful hikes throughout the park. Notice again the foreground is kind of washed out. We don't care about that. At this point, I'm really trying to pull out what I can from Mount Rainier. We can even make it disappear if we want. So the contrast button also helped not only with the mountain peak, but some of the mountain portions below the peak area too. So, and with the photograph, you could pull things closer to you. You can expand, magnify, if you will, certain sections to pick up details. Now notice the clouds. The clouds you can't see very well at all with the reference photo, but I was able to find clouds by hitting that contrast button and then put them in the painting with a little bit of soft pastel pink and a little bit of orange in there also. The other tool I use almost all the time is, and I think I'm going to show you here, I think we're going to look at contrast one more time to see how the clouds begin to emerge over Mount Rainier. Okay, again, we couldn't see them in the original photograph, and now we can. And you could save these versions of your photograph and go back to them if you wanted to, or you could just kind of reverse the changes and go back to your original. So there again, just playing around with the contrast button. See the clouds and the dark blues of the mountain. So looking at this photograph, so what we're going to do is we're going to put the contrast level back to where it was, and we're going to talk about using saturation in photographs. Now, the saturation tool, as you know, will really enhance the chroma of the colors, and it's a great tool to help pull out colors that you might not see in the landscape. So here's a saturation tool. I'm going to not reverse it, but I'm going to increase the saturation. And notice how the orange foliage at the base really brightens up. Notice also the blues in the mountains are more enhanced. I love to use nice, really mid-value but vibrant chromatic blues in my distant mountain scenes. So the saturation point worked out really well. And as you could see with the final painting is I brought about a bunch of saturation points of saturation, yellows and oranges, and enhanced the blues more so than in that reference photo. And again, it kind of brings out colors that you might not have seen. Certainly in that dusty, rocky area, there were some oranges and mauve type colors in the rocks, and those were not evident in the original painting. There's the painting there. It looks kind of, the rocks kind of look all about a whitish kind of a beige color. We are now in Zion National Park. I spent some good time in Zion, hiking to Angels Lookout Trail and the other four mighty national parks at Zion. And I'm going to create a notan. Here's my sketch notan here on the right using my Sharpie pencil to try to get the deepest values in the painting. I only want the black and the white here, and all I'm doing is noting the black or the dark parts. So again, I'll go to the photo editing tool. I'm going to go to filters. I'm going to scroll down, and I'm looking not for black and white, but I'm going to look for black and white high contrast. Let's hit that button there. Notice how dark that shaded area on the mountains on the left side of the painting, and how they're bringing out the darkness in the right side mountain there at the base of it. This is a painting. This is also another 18 by 24 National Parks painting I'm doing of Zion National Park. Currently work in progress, looking forward to wrapping it up. I'm very happy with it so far. I've done my homework. I did my notan, as you can see here. I also do a small scale version of the painting, and grayscale versions are very helpful. But now we're heading off to Grand Teton National Park, and we're going to do some rearranging of this painting. So there's the painting on the right, 18 by 24 pastel. The middle photograph is the main reference photo. This is Taggart Lake, another wonderful hike at Grand Teton National Park. Overcast day. It was kind of sad actually to see the clouds move in because it's a beautiful, beautiful lake, and the effect on the mountains were beautiful earlier in that day when it was fully sunny. And the other reference photo on the left. Let's talk about the painting now. The left side of the painting has a tree line, some pine trees and rocks, etc., on the left, right there. And you don't see that in the main reference photo in the middle, but you do on the left reference photo. So the left reference photo, what I did is I brought on some of that pine tree. I brought in some of the foliage. There you go. Now we can see that. And also the rocks were not in that main reference photo. The rocks were really cool, and the reflections in the water, and the water was just perfectly clear. It was really fantastic to look at. So here I've taken elements of one reference photo, and there's the large version of that reference photo. You can see the rocks, you can see some of the reflections, and I've moved that into the left side of the painting. And I like the right side of the painting, which is the kind of the elongated line of evergreens, and some rocks. I've kept those in the painting. And again, the mountains are the mountains. The main mountains in the Teton Range. As you can see, the reference photo on the left does not show much of the Tetons there at all. So, but it was an overcast day, and it was, well, I was a happy hiker anyway, but it was sad to see the sun go away. So I want to play around with some daylight here. So I'm going to go and I'm going to turn my overcast day into a sunny day. So I'm going to play around with brightness to start. That seems the most obvious tool here, where we could bring in some of the uh, lightness really throughout the painting. Look how the water changes, but notice the mountains have vanished. I've destroyed the Teton range by changing that brightness. So brightness I didn't care for very much, but I put it in about a middle range of brightness in terms of adjustment. Then I'm going to go down to my warmth tool, and I'm going to increase the warmth just a little bit because I'm going to be bringing in some oranges and light yellows and oranges, etc., that will reflect that sunlight. So I need to reduce my brightness though to get my mountains back. So there is definitely a compromise here in using the brightness tool and the warmth tool to help enhance a painting that's overcast to turn it into a more of a sunny day. This is not a perfect tool, so you've got to really use some of your artist license to adjust the sunlight properly. So there's the final version of Taggart Lake Serenity. Again, that's another 18 by 24 pastel. I've gotten in the bad habit of doing big pastels. I guess maybe it's a good habit because I like to add the detail. They go on and on and on. Mark Borges is a really well-known oil painter, and he says his paintings go on and on and on. This is how you could reach me. There's my website, and follow me on Instagram at Bob Palmerton Art. Thanks so much for visiting today, and enjoy painting.